So let's move down the page here, and let's talk about what happens when we already know something is a function. So I know if I look at the graph here, this will cross the vertical line test because it's using function notation. So I'm told this is a function. What I'm going to do is try to evaluate what happens when the input value is 4. So when I've got the f function, I'm going to have the input be the number 4. So I'm going to put 4 where the x is and add 5. So if the input is 4, the output is 9. So from the previous video in the previous section, we know that if we graphed this, there would be a point at 4, 9. So now we have the g function, because all functions don't have to necessarily be f. For instance, sometime if you're talking about profit in business, you might say p of x. Or maybe you're talking about the height of something compared to time. You might use h of x instead of f. So this time we're going to be looking at the g function, which is 3x minus 2. And in place of x, I'm going to put a 5. So the input value is 5, and I'm trying to find the output value. So when the input is 5, the output is going to be 15 subtract 2, which is 13. So there ought to be a point on the graph at 5, 13. So let's try h of negative 2. So the h function is x squared plus 5. So I'm going to put negative 2 in for x. This is one we have to be careful about. When we have negative 2 and we square it, if we put that in our calculator, we have to put the negative 2 in parentheses and the square on the outside. So h of negative 2 equals 4 plus 5, which is 9. Look at the next one. This time it tells you what f of x is. It tells you the output value. So the output value of f is 10. So I'm going to try to find the input value. So if the output is 10, what's the input value? Subtract 5 from both sides. So 5 equals x. So there ought to be a point on this one at 5, 10. Okay, the last one. So I know the output value is 10 for the g function, which is 3x minus 2. So add 2 to both sides. Divide both sides by 3. So x equals 4. So there's a point at 4, 10. So sometimes we can be given an equation. Sometimes we're given the graph and we have to evaluate. So we have two different things happening here. We have a g function, which is this line, and we have an f function, which is this line. So let's start with the f function first. So when the input value is negative 2, I want to find the output. Again, the input is your x, and the output is your y. So I've got input of negative 2. So input negative 2, output negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. This time I'm talking about the g function. So input 2, and I'm trying to find output of g. So input 1, 2, output negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. This time for the f function, notice I'm given the output. So I want to find what the input is if the output is negative 4. So I've got to go down to negative 4. So at negative 4 for output, the input is 0. So when x is 0, y is negative 4. Let's do another one like that one. Let's go down here to the g one. G output 3. So if I go output 3, G is 0. That just happened to work that way on this one. It won't always. Okay, let's look at G when G is -1. So -1, output 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So when you're talking about functions, you're talking about inputs and outputs.